Well, good morning. June 30th, Tuesday, 2026. We are at the site of the Battle of Big Dry Wash. It's known as the last major battle between the Apaches and the cavalry, U.S. cavalry. It took place in June 17th, 1882. And so we're gonna go explore this a little bit and see what we can find and learn a little bit. So come along with me, let's go. Okay, we are at the official battlefield monument. It gives a brief description of the battle itself. I'm going to try to explain it to you as much as I know about it. But this is basically the location where the battle started. The Apaches, 40 or 50 of them, 50 or 60 of them, I guess, were over on the other side of the canyon. According to everything I've read, this thing says that they're down, right just down below, there are makeshift firing pits where the Apaches set up and expected to ambush the cavalry that was coming in. The cavalry was coming in from this direction up here. It was Captain Ada Chaffee and probably 50 or 60 men of his contingent that had been chasing the Apaches since San Carlos Reservation. So anyway, the Apaches set up on the other side of the river, as far as I know, and we're going to ambush Chaffee and his men as they came down the hill here and entered the canyon. Unfortunately for the Apaches, Al Seaver, the chief of scouts, and his Apache scouts spotted the ambush ahead of time, warned Chaffee, and Chaffee set up a line of skirmish right about here, like this, and engaged the Apaches. I don't know how he ever saw them, unless there were no trees back in those days, but I can't imagine that. So anyway, he set up a line of skirmish right here, engaged the Apaches. He sent 2 troops to the west, to the east, about a mile upriver, downriver, and they circled around and came back behind and flanked the Apaches. He sent 2 more troops off this direction, off to the west, and they did the same thing. They encircled and engaged from the flank. So we'll talk more about that when we get down at the bottom down there. Well, I'm getting down to the point where the monument says there are makeshift firing pits that the Indians set up to ambush the cavalry. We'll see if we can see anything. I've been here 3 times. This is my 3rd time now, and I've not really discovered anything like that. Doesn't mean they're not here. It's been 140 some odd years since this happened. Now maybe up here. This might be one of the makeshift firing pits that the Apaches set up, although I kind of doubt it. It looks like the stuff was stacked fairly recently. What would I know? And according to the monument, there are firing pits along here. According to some of the things I read, the Apaches were on the other side of the creek, which is still farther down. And we are, just so you know, we are up on the Mogollon Rim. We're about 40 miles south of Winslow, Arizona. We are close to what used to be called Dry Wash. It's now called East Clear Creek. I am on what could have been easily a firing position, but I'm looking back at the original firing position that we were at a minute ago. If this wasn't a firing position, it missed a really good opportunity. As you look down from this point right here, that's probably 50 feet to that lower elevation. Like I say, if Chappie and his men had come from, say, the right to the left, along that area right there, this would have been a beautiful spot to ambush them. And this might be why, they might be right on the monument. This might be why Al Sieber's scouts were able to spot them, because this is a whole lot easier, I think, to see somebody than it would be to see them from here across the river or the creek. So, we have quite a ways to go to get down there. It's really pretty in here. It's I've read it described as a park-like setting, and that's really true. If you didn't know what had happened here 140 years ago, you know, you would just think this is a beautiful place to be, and it is. So we have to continue on down this way. We still have a pretty good distance to go before we get down to the creek. So I don't know how, if the Indians were up there, I could see how they might have been spotted pretty easily. But if they were on the other side of the creek, like a lot of these reports say, I mean, look at that. There's nothing but tree cover. It's hard to appreciate the trail, I think, just from a camera's point of view. I want to give you an example of the pitch of this trail. I see lots of elk track, pretty fresh elk track too, and I saw some poop back up there. I can actually see the creek from here, I think. Now I get to go back and get the camera. It's a lot of fun. All of this stuff for me is extremely interesting, and for me, it's all about making memories, and that's what my hiker trailer is all about. I can take my hiker trailer to some remote place like this, and I can explore a battlefield that not a lot of people know about even. Very few people come out here. It's not hard, but it's a rugged road. And there's not a lot of readily available information. You kind of have to dig for it a little bit. But yeah, I can do this. I can park in front of a museum. I can go to museums. I can go to ancient ruins that you can drive right up to, which I have done, like Apache, Walnut Canyon. And I'm gonna go to Keat Seal, Hovenweep, maybe Mesa Verde. It looked awfully crowded. I don't really like that. Up into Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. So I can go, with my trailer, I can go to a campground that has all the amenities. The only thing I actually could use would be electric and the porta potties or the pit toilets, whatever they got. Or I can go out like I am here, camped where there is nothing. The only thing remotely civilized is that monument for the depicting the battle. So that's what I love about my trailer. And it's lightweight. It'll go anywhere. Oops. Turn you over. So there's a beautiful campsite right down there. And it's on the last ledge before you actually get to the creek. Don't know how far to go. So now we start to get a glimpse of the other side of the canyon, the north side of the creek, which is called Dry Wash. And as I'm looking down there, it's almost dry now. The first time I came up here, it was pretty full. Down there is that nice little campsite. Can't you just imagine when the water's up, bringing a kayak down through here and camping right there and spending a couple of nights? How great would that be? This is a really good spot to give you the overall view. And if that's where the Indians set up, is on the other side of this canyon, they would have had great firing positions down on the army as they came down in this canyon to cross this creek. That's where most of the stuff I've read says they were. So 2 troops went off in that direction about a mile and came up around behind the Apache. And 2 troops went off in the other direction, off that way, and did the same thing. Went around behind the Apache and came back from their flank and behind them. The first time I came up here, this water was almost to where I'm sitting right now. No, maybe not. Not 4 or 5 feet below. But now you can see why it would have been called Dry Wash, because it's easy to imagine just no more water in here at all. We've had a dry year, dry spell like everybody else in the country almost. Well, I guess not out Midwest. Here's another look at just how dry it is right now. It's a little mud, but there's no water down there. Could easily be called Dry Wash. And if Chaffee had been unlucky enough to go down in there and the Apache were on the other side, it could have been a real disaster for them. More elk poop. That's pretty fresh. And the tracks I've seen coming down here have been pretty fresh. And I have actually seen a couple of stones freshly turned over. I'm wondering if it was bear looking for grubs. So why here? Why this battle? And why was it considered so important? Well, first of all, it was the last major pitched battle between Apaches and the cavalry in Arizona. There were more battles. Geronimo went down in Mexico. They spent another 4 or 5 years trying to capture him. That was General Crook did that. But prior to this, in the 1800s, most Apaches were put onto reservations, in particular the San Carlos Reservation, south of here. In the reservations, they felt humiliated. They didn't have any hunting grounds. They didn't have any real freedoms. In addition to all that, the food that was being distributed to them was inadequate. And there were some complaints about corruptness with the Indian Bureau. Plus the cavalry or the army kept really heavy hand on them, so they had no real freedom. And they, like I said, they felt humiliated. So in 1881, there was a battle called Sibique Creek that was down by San Carlos Reservation. In that battle, one of their lesser medicine men, I couldn't even begin to pronounce his name, was killed in that battle. So rumors spread in the Apache reservation that they were going to be hauled out of Arizona and that they were going to be disarmed and they were going to be killed. And there was all kinds of rumors going on, like there are nowadays. So one of the warriors named Teotish riled up a bunch of fellow warriors, some of whom had been at the Battle of Sibique Creek. So he rounded them up, probably, well, estimates are from between 50 and 60. They left the reservation, they headed north. On the way north, they went through the Tonto Reservation, up Cherry Creek Reserve, up on the rim and up to here. They were pursued by Captain Chaffee, Adna Chaffee, with about 50 men or so. In their contingent was Al Seaver, chief scout, and about 20 or so Apache scouts. Also in the contingent was Tom Horn, famous, infamous Tom Horn, however you want to look at it. And another guy that you may or may not know about was named Mickey Free, who had been captured at one time by Apaches, raised by Apaches. He was Mexican, I believe. He was raised by Apaches, left there and joined with the army and became a scout. So he was one of the top dogs there. Al Seaver was considered the very top of the scout chain. So anyway, they followed the Apaches up to this area up here. Like I said, up that battleground monument is basically where Al Seaver and his scouts somewhere in this neighborhood spotted movement and detected that there was going to be an ambush. So they went back and they told Chaffee. Chaffee spread out and engaged, kept the Apaches' attention on them while two troops went that direction and two troops went that direction, far enough to be out of view of them, circled around behind them and engaged from the rear. Now Teotish failed to put out rear guards, so they were able to sneak up on them, and that really decided the battle, because like I said a minute ago, if Chaffee had come down in here and gone into that ravine and the Indians were up there, that would have been bad news for them. So anyway, the battle was engaged for 2 to 4 hours. I read 2 hours, I read 4 hours. I think it's 4 hours. It was really only stopped by a really heavy rain and hailstorm. And that, in the cover of that storm, is when the survivors of the Apaches boogied out and went back to the reservation. They headed north and went back to the reservation. So there were, I read, between 20 and 27 Apaches killed here in this area. 2 cavalrymen killed in this area. There were 4 cavalrymen that were issued medals of honor. Apparently that's one of the highest counts of any Indian battle where people were awarded the Medal of Honor. In the end, after Chaffee had engaged and troops came up from, I think it was Fort Henry and Apache, and by the time that whole thing was over, there was something around the number of 350 troops up here against the 50 or 60 Apaches that were here. So they probably would have been destroyed anyway, even if they had managed to ambush Chaffee, because there was just a whole lot more cavalry than there were Indians. But it would have been bad for Chaffee. So Al Sieber went on to fight with General George Crook in the Apache Wars against Geronimo all the way down into Mexico. He wasn't there when Geronimo surrendered. He was out on patrol out of, I think, Camp Verde, and had an accident up there. I'll have to look it up and see what that was. When the Teotihuacan and his 50 or 60 cohorts left the San Carlos Reservation, went up through Tonto and all of that, they killed somewhere around 8 settlers and other Apaches, the chief of police of the Apaches, and they stole somewhere in the neighborhood or ran off somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 horses before they got up here and were stopped. So yeah, there was something like 350 cavalry involved in this thing, but it was all done. Elements of the, let me read this. Elements of the 3rd and 6th Cavalry commanded by Major Andrew W. Evans. So Medal of Honor recipients at the Big Dry Wash. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise was a lieutenant, and he rescued a wounded soldier while under heavy fire. He got the Medal of Honor for that. And there was George H. Morgan, Frank West, and Charles Taylor. I couldn't find much about them. Now Teotihuacan, the leader of this whole uprising, if you want to call it that, was killed here. Between 16 and 27 Indians were killed here, and 2 cavalrymen. And I gotta wonder, did they carry them all out? Did they bury them here? Are they underground here somewhere? Although the rock around here would make it really hard to bury anybody. If you sit here quiet enough for a while, it's easy to imagine the sounds of the battle, the gunfire, and all of that. But if you didn't know about it, this is just a beautiful place. Just a beautiful place. From what I've read, part of the route that the Teotihuacan and Apache warriors and consequently Chaffee took, coming up through Cherry Creek, they went also by what is now General Springs Cabin. There's another, I did a video on General Springs Cabin if you want to go look at that. It was not there at that time, of course. But that's an interesting little place too. Just a 2-room cabin where foresters used to have to stay. I want to read something to you about Al Sieber. It says, Al Sieber, the Iron Man of the Apache Wars, was arguably the most important civilian scout in the American Southwest during the Apache Wars. If General Crook was the strategist, Seaver was often the man that made it work. After serving in the Union Army during the Civil War and being wounded at Gettysburg, Seaver was moved west and became a prospector. In 1871, he was hired as Chief of Scouts in Arizona Territory and eventually served under General Crook. He became renowned for organizing and leading Apache Scouts against Apache bands, which was apparently a lot more successful than just having the cavalry attack them. He also was really trusted by his scouts. Even though he was a white man, his Apache Scouts apparently trusted him wholeheartedly. So Seaver later served with General Crook as lead civilian scout during the pursuit of Geronimo into Mexico. He was not, as I said, he wasn't present at the surrender, but he played a major role. His end was surprisingly mundane compared to his violent career. In 1907, while supervising Apache laborers working on roads associated with the Roosevelt Dam project, he was killed by a falling boulder. So watch out for those rocks. Tom Horn, another Old West famous personality. He was an interpreter, a detective, and an alleged assassin. One of the most controversial figures of the Old West. As a teenager, he joined the Army as a civilian scout and worked under Al Seaver. He learned tracking, fieldcraft, Apache languages, Spanish, and military scouting, and how to survive in backcountry. Horn was present at the Battle of Big Dry Wash. Several accounts credit Horn and Lieutenant George Morgan for maneuvering into a position from which they could fire on the Apaches. After serving in the Army during the Civil War, that's the wrong guy. By 1885, he became Chief of Scouts under Captain Emmett Crawford and served as an interpreter during negotiations with Geronimo. He was present at Geronimo's final surrender. After the Apache Wars, the cattle industry realized that they could use his skills. So they asked him and had him fight, go north and fight with the rustlers, the horse thieves, range war opponents. He worked with the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. He became famous or infamous for operating alone with a rifle and tracking suspects through vast territories. The Willie Nickel murder. Horn's downfall came from the 1901 shooting death of 14-year-old Willie Nickel in Wyoming. Horn was convicted largely on the confession obtained by Joe LaFlores. Case remains controversial. And there were no eyewitnesses. He was hung in Cheyenne, Wyoming on November 20th. Tom Horn was a founder or frontier-born scout, worked for the Army in Pinkerton and ranchers, executed for murder and still highly controversial. Al Seaver was a Civil War veteran, Chief of Scouts and interpreter, worked primarily for the Army, died in an accident, and is still respected by historians. I apologize for having to read some of this, but my memory's not that great. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. I hope this kind of video is not boring for you. I find it extremely interesting, and I will do a lot of this. That's why I got my hiker trailer, to do this kind of stuff. So if you have any suggestions If you like this, or if you didn't like it, comment. Please comment, because that really helps the algorithm. And I'm trying to grow this little channel. You know, with the pipe dream of hopefully making a little bit of money so I can just travel. I don't need a lot, but I do need some. And subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Take that little button and just go, I subscribed. And be proud of yourself, because that's a good thing to do. Good. Good. Oh.